Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. I wanted to speak about a concept which I am giving shape to. And I wanted to talk about this idea of the fourth eye and how does it fit within the context of all the previous eyes that we have as a creature, as a being. Okay. Hopefully the audio is adjusted and the background music is audible. There is a vision I have personally, some sort of vision in my mind, which leads to a very profound feeling, and that feeling causes me to care about the future of whatever that is happening now. It's this feeling of urgency, it's this feeling of possibility. And it's as if all the unborn future generations were watching us now, what would the human beings alive now do? In mysticism, there is this idea in yoga and various traditions, this idea of the third eye. And some people take it literally, they think it's the pineal gland, for example, in the New Age community, and others have a different view on it. For me personally, I start from where my consciousness arises, and I experience the texture of existence, but then there's known variables and unknown variables to the moment that suggest what the value of the moment is. To start off, the way the dimensions of reality have opened up to my perception is that there is a visible life, and this is our existence. And the thing about existence is that it has a sort of singular quality. No human being can go to another human being and say, I'm existing more than you. In some sense, the existence is there. Everybody is who is alive and just a physical entity, a sort of object, we're existentially equal. We're all existing. We're all existential beings. Now, with this existence comes two biological eyes, and what's very fascinating is we have two eyes that see the same view. Now, what's very fascinating is that light enters our eyes and we see reality. We see what is in front of our eyes. But if a person was to close their eyes and still attempt to see, it is not contentless. And so what the third eye is, at least the way I understand it, is that it is the mind's sight. The third eye is how we can see when our eyes are closed. And it is access to a space where actually the sense of self is residing in. You know, when we look at a person, we're like, okay, the person's physically existing there. But when that person speaks or when that person identifies with anything in reality, it seems like overlaying this existential dimension, this existential world is an experiential world. And what is very fascinating is that we are all publicly existing, but we are privately experiencing our existence. And so there's a sort of double edged nature to man's intelligence, that on one side of the coin, we are the effect of our intelligence, which is the expression of it. But on the other side of the coin, we are an instantaneous causal being, which is present as an awareness, as a space. So, really, what's going on here is that we're these creatures that are considering we have minds, but we don't know what the mind is. But when we come to wonder about, through direct experience, what the nature of the mind is, it's actually, how would I say it? It's kind of like you find your body in your mind. Right now, my mind is like the awareness to my whole moment, and my body is a part of it. These words are also a part of it. If I choose to identify with the presence of the awareness that I am being, all the content of my life is within my awareness. It takes us to this philosophical view that Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe, suggested, where he was saying, if there's nobody in a forest and a tree falls, did the tree fall? In order for human consciousness, human beings to experience life, there needs to be the presence of an energetic attention being simultaneous with existence. Now, what I came to realize, or if I could try to share the viewers what sort of transition I went through from my youth till now, and what kind of changed, or what I realized about the nature of intelligence, is that I got the clues from the biological body, that when you look at the human body, there's certain voluntary actions, certain things we can control, and certain things that are involuntarily happening. If we were to look at the evolution of how the human being is existing now, we will come to see that we were being moved by nature unconsciously. And through the development of self-awareness, man began to notice how he's separate from the world, first physically and then non-physically. And it's this bizarre view where the person's like, why was this animal evolving? And suddenly realize the animal evolved to be a subject to itself. That means the intention of sophisticated existential activity, or it's as if the periodic table did something so sophisticated that it became a subject to itself while it's still being an object. You see, reality is multidimensional. We have been just told stories of how it is happening in one way, and the problems of the world is that the species has not realized we have a body in a singular dimension, but our mind is multidimensionally experiencing, positioning, and even remembering the body. There are certain privileges that comes with being conscious of one's own mind. And if we were to wonder about, okay, what's the point of consciousness for a creature that nature was moving this whole time? excuse me, to continue. Certain privileges come with being a mind. For me, what I find the major intent behind self-awareness is in a world, in a realm where there are forces that we consider inanimate, let's say a sort of mindless forces are moving nature, and then at some point a mind emerges. Now we're wondering, why has the mind appeared in a mindless space? But the realization is that the mind is the space. What human intelligence is a type of intelligence that is both rooted in matter and in space. It's this poetic vision that, think of it this way, that there's two textures, two types of states of reality. A state where it's just pure space, and a state where it's just pure matter. In ancient Vedic times, they called it Purusha and Prakriti. Now they also had the idea of the soul, which was this independent agent from the conditional reality that moved through the reality and was transmigratory, especially when it comes to the idea of reincarnation and whatnot. The Buddhist view on reincarnation. So it's kind of like I'm saying, we're acting like, poetically, our soul is only in the object, but there is an ability to move subjects just like we move objects. I realize that I can, my eyes are open, I can raise my hand in the air with like a, whim of my attention instantly. But I have realized that when I close my eyes, I can ask a question from the moment instantly. That means behind our eyes there's a sort of inner realm, in front of our eyes there is an outer realm, and a lot of life is the relationship between how we are experiencing our existence and how we are existing to our experience. It's as if there's an experience, there's the observer, and there's the observed. The observed has the texture of existence, the observer has the texture of experience. Now, when it comes to the mystery of what is looking out through the person's eyes, there's something fascinating when it comes to the notion of emergence, right? There's this view that there's a backstory to the person's life before they were born, which is a sort of metaphysical engagement with language, but at the same time, there's this view that it's like a person emerged out of what the state the world is, out of what the world is. It's kind of like us wondering about what gave birth, not to our ancestors, but what gave birth to the world of our ancestors. And the world emerged, the world arose. It was something as if there was a potential that was imagine the cosmos being a sort of infinite potential, and then there being certain temperature fluctuations, and then the infinite potential of reality took the shape of manifestation. Now there is concerns about creaturehood. For me to be a creature in outer space is such unique geometry that it blows my mind to some degree. Even if the person doesn't identify a sort of subject as a sort of higher power, the person can see that the geometry of this world is something that we cannot understand, how shape appears out of space. This is the bizarre thing of reality, because when we study particles, or to some degree want to know what the smallest unit of physical reality is, we come to a sort of appreciation of a shape, but then it's the interaction of shape. So what it is that most people are understanding physicality as static geometry in space. Anyways, to continue, I have wondered, to some degree, I have been acquainted with the third eye. I have been acquainted with my mind sight. We all are acquainted with how the nature of our mind moves our body, and if we choose to be still and silent, we will experience our presence through non-dualistic and dehumanized ways. And the human attention has a very different sort of journey than the human body. The purpose of matter is to stick around. The purpose of mind is to activate. Space is the potential of reality. Matter is the ignition to how that potential becomes actualized. Now, what I am considering the fourth eye to be, I'm this person who metaphysics had an allure for me at a young age. The mysteries of the mind were fascinating to me. But as I journeyed through the experiences that life had intended for me, I came to realize that upon the recognition, it's as if we're a species and our intelligence, our brains, or let's say our bodies are this super advanced technology, and we have only understood how to function in a sort of singular existence and dualistic experience. Right now, the engagement of the creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere is with a dualistic reality. To be a self in a world is itself a duality. Now, what I am envisioning is that what else can the intelligence of man do? And it's as if the person wondering, why do I have a body? Why do I have a mind? Why is there a world here? And why am I alive? And it's questions like these that are sort of like lightning strikes, where at first you hear the sound and then suddenly the realization arises that life is an opportunity to participate in the most unknown event that has taken place so far. When I treated life as an unknown event, it changed. It was a game changer. Why? Because I realized that every person is headed for the unknown. We fear non-existence, not realizing non-existence is an unknown state. And so how knowledge conceives its own absence is a sort of impossibility. It's as if nobody can know non-existence if they are existing. What's fascinating is that there are mysteries surrounding the world, and there are problems to solve and problems that have not even been discovered yet to solve. That's the fascination of opening your mind to the future. It's as if the person looking at how the past, like most religious people, it is the past that is judging their character in the present. But imagine the species had a shift where it wasn't the past judging us, but we felt judged by the future that we did not activate. The fourth eye is the collective vision of the species. It is the realization that there is a different sort of sight, a sight that is dependent on collective activation. Creatures live in environments, and their environment tends to influence their character and behavior. But the human species is so advanced compared to other creatures, on this planet, that we manage to separate some part of ourselves with the environment that had extended us. We are no longer creatures. We are no longer, it's like we used to be the unconscious walking earth. Now we have become, the conscious human being in Earth. That was a huge transition, a transition equivalent to, like, imagine a four-limbed creature standing on two legs and being like, no way, I don't smell dirt anymore. Similarly, the species awakened to a subjective dimension of unnatural movement, and it is our unnaturalness that is the divinity in nature. That means there could be a huge debate that what is divine is how the natural was never natural. In regards to the fourth eye, I am just somebody has to say it, right? People have wondered about it. They've gone up to the third eye, which is the inner realms, the mind sight. But the fourth eye is, in some sense, the visions of the future. It is the fourth eye is seeing the future of a collective species. It is a greater game than our individualism. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the person, in some sense, starts off with satisfying their physiological needs, psychological needs, then leading to self-actualization. But the most actualized self of it's like the most advanced individual is limited to the advancement of their world. And so after one has achieved a sort of victory of their individualism, for certain people, for them it's a remembrance. It's like a being. Imagine there's people who are like, am I a good person and a bad person? And then there's people in India, right, who have this vision that they have lived so many lifetimes of being good and bad people that the point of life is not the individual behavior only, but it is that how is the individual relevant or related to a sort of collective emergence and collective atmosphere of reality. It's the behavior of the activity of attention in accordance to an individual and collective context. That is what our species is doing. We're slowly moving into an era of collectivity. And language was a very important step. Language was a sort of, it's like the first type of civilization we created was in story form, and then from stories we go beyond. What I find happens to the psyche is that the moment it discovers its limits, it is also noticing its limits, and it's the nature of observance. It's kind of like whatever we see, a part of us feels, and that's for example, if I was to look at a tree, it's like the way I acknowledge myself, okay, I'm not this tree because I'm outside of the tree watching it. So the nature of being a conscious observer is to, in some sense, just the nature of consciousness is to create a distance between the observer and observed in the moment. Our minds are here to create a unique separation. Now it is up to us to wonder about why have we separated from a world that was unconsciously happening as a singular event. For me, there's an incredible poetry in this idea of being a servant of humanity. Human beings are energy. We're energetic beings, and our body is like the container of the energy. Our mind is like the container of a sort of the inner boundaries of our energy. And so it's as if there's this energy that has an opportunity to do something for, let's say, a lifespan of 100 years. It's like in 100 years, what can we do? And for me, it has come not to be just an individual search. Too many people are just living in isolated happiness. To me, it's bizarre. So many people, life is to them, they feel that the collective is in some sense too big, right? I don't know what it is, but for me, I feel there's a dimension of honor missing in modern civilization. That means all the problems of our species is because of its value system, because of how it's valuing reality, and people are left usually to value reality in accordance to their inner realm. What that means is the world that the human being first sees is not the actual world. It's not the original Earth. It is their Earth. But once the person realizes that, okay, my body is an activity in an unknown place, my mind is an activity also in an unknown place, and there is certain let's say ranges of this activity that one can control as a sort of mysterious unknown witness of the moment. There is a Mysterianism to psychology. right? There's a way that in an instant we can fathom many instances of time. Right now, our minds are the closest thing to time machines in the sense that the person can remember yesterday, but they're present here today. It's kind of like the mind doesn't have an issue with time, and the nature of memory is to convince the biology that that yesterday is still alive, you know. You know, the fourth eye is how the eyes of our species begins to look at the same value, begins to find the same value. You know, there's something about just the idea of 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, where through language we have converted nowhere into now here through language. So many different human beings have opened their eyes, and you can say a majority of the human population wants to just fit into the world that was here before, not realizing there are things unseen. There are moments undiscovered, and the exploration of lifetimes awaits us. Why? Because the species has chosen continuity. You know what really a species in the void is, what the idea of extinction truly is. The poetry of extinction is the suggestion that, you know, it's like religious people feel they are in a test, in God's test, that the world is God's test. But I would say from a secular perspective, mankind, the test of extinction is in some sense what was the ability of something that had ability before it no longer had it. We are beings now. We are the presence of the universal sector. Our eyes open and we can march towards the visions of the future. The future is one of the most greatest mental health stabilizers and a person's vision of the future. You know, right now in 2022, can anybody say we are honored by our future? Can we say we're fascinated by our future? People, it's like the species is in kindergarten, you know. It's still just playing with its environment, not realizing that once playfulness has been experienced, one begins to realize the value of the serious. You know, the educational system is not inspiring explorers. It is pretty much putting a giant hat. Like, this is really, to me, the vision of the educational system. Imagine a child goes to school and there's this giant hat called the past, and the teacher just puts that giant hat, over the eyes of the child. And the child feels that there has been a might before it that it cannot compete with. But what I'm trying to do is that it's like really, I don't want to say I have an incredible respect for any human being who's a teacher and any human being who is an honest student, right? But at the same time, I feel there's an archaic quality to the concept of the teacher and the student. And when will the species awaken that we are conditionally known entities in an unknown world? It's an unknown world. There is no greater, sentence. There's no greater spiritual sentence than the species has contacted the unknown. The ancients had found remedies to it through linguistic means, but now it is the time for the emergence of the advanced humanity. That is when we are alive now. We are alive in the most historic phase of human history. The most fascinating phase. We are alive at that time where we're wondering, what decision will 8 billion beings make? Are they capable of stepping out of their inner realms, climbing out of the tunnels of their self-simulation, and realizing that there is a world here that deserves an activation, that deserves advancement? Advancement is like, how can I tell you? It's like, it can poetically be seen as the force of the divine, the authorization of the divine, and it can simultaneously be seen as the greatest act of the free will. We are the caretakers of evolution. We are the eyes that chose to survive. Our ancestors lived so our eyes could be open, and now what are our eyes seeing? There's so many different types of suffering. I remember one day I was thinking, man, there's so many different ways people are suffering on this planet. We could create a dictionary, or we could have levels to suffering. But then I remember I heard this story, I think it was from online or somewhere, right? There was this story where somebody had said it was more like an African story, I believe, shared in like the tribes in Africa. And it was this idea that if everybody threw their problems into a giant fire, people will suddenly take their problems back, and realizing how many different intensities of suffering start. For me, there's one argument that has made me realize why the concept of world peace makes sense. Because for the longest time I'm like, okay, what's the point of caging animals that are animals? What's the point of bringing gentleness to savages, And what I realize, it's just the ability of mind. Something in evolution realized that by being less savage, it could be more advanced than other savage creatures. And when we look at how the human species stepped out of the food chain, it wasn't because of its savageness, it was because of its ability to notice a different way the moment could move. This is the true power of the free will. This is the true power of human beings. That means if in the future there's extraterrestrial invasions, our species stands as having the ability of multidimensional sight and even multidimensional hindsight. This is the value of the human mind, dear viewers. The mind sight is here to be used to discover the fourth sight, which is the poetic vision of the fourth eye, being the vision of the human species. We are a collective, whether we like it or not, There's moments where I wonder, some moments I am, I look up to myself, and there's some moments where I look down on myself. And when I look down on myself, I ask myself, why do I need to be related to anything? Why should there be anything that I care for on this planet, right? It's like, that's the thing about materialism, that after some point you become numb to the potential value of emotions creating new views. All human beings should realize that in front of our eyes, we are sure a one physical body that's changing slowly over time, but behind our eyes, we are tunneling through self-simulation. This is what's going on. And when a human being speaks, it's more like the events of the mind, inner events being transcribed into external sound. Now, for me, zooming in on why there is a value to peacefulness, to gentleness, is because there is an advanced technology here. I remember reading, not reading, but seeing this person interviewing Isaac Asimov, and Isaac Asimov, this next level scientist and science fiction writer. He said something so incredible that it really changed my life, his quote. And he said, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. And really, what the purpose of this world is, dear viewers, is for us as a species to discover our ability, all of our abilities, nothing hidden in the shadows, no more, because it is one lifetime, and it's like there's one lifetime and lions are acting like sheep, and it's like the Lion King is in the future already roaring, it's like the greatness of this world is what we can do while we were here, not the fantasy of where we will go when we are no longer. It's sometimes it breaks my heart how easy human beings have considered the idea of paradise in the afterlife, but they have not considered the paradise before this life. It's like we need to build paradise on earth. Why? Because the mind is unique. The mind is something that nothing like this has appeared in nature with this level of sophistication. Do you know? We are like an intelligence that is actually unbelievable to its own beliefs. We should focus on competence, and it's literally the activation of ability. In my view, I just envision that in the future, violence will be moved in cyberspace. The era of physical war will end, and human beings will realize the reason we stepped out of the jungle and we built the concrete jungle because we didn't want to be in the jungle. There's something about man's mind where he entertains savageness, he descends. But when he realizes, and the patience, they say patience is a virtue. Why? Because more information arises before there's a unnecessary reactive decision. It's the competence that's the key. What the future generations are waiting for is the greatest performances of all human beings. And if we treat life as a performance, I sometimes treat it as if I'm a traveler, right? Some people think I have a big ego, like when I give these talks, but I am just one corner of the universe. Who is, sometimes I feel like just a musician playing my instrument, it's kind of like. I don't know what it is, but it's like the ancient Greeks said to tame the savageness of man and make gentler the life of this world. In that gentleness, man will discover ways that his mind can move where previously his body did not allow. We should start treating every human being as if there is an unknown way the world is moving behind their eyes. To me, ever since I've done this, I have managed to somehow care, for creatures, even though I realize to some degree, like as the Buddha said, the nature of objective phenomena is empty, and it is our mind which puts the nature into the moment. It is important to acknowledge our limitations, but it is unnecessary to worship them. And extinction, the fear of extinction is like worshiping an ending. It's like, what's the point of the beginning then? The fourth eye is the heartbeat of humanity. It is that which is bigger than all of our lives, and if we're conscious, we can serve it. To serve the advancement of a species in the void, what greater honorable task is there? I remember, years ago, somebody had said this sentence where they said that religious books are like instruction booklets for the world. You know, like the prophets had brought instruction booklets. You know, or life manuals. And I thought about this, and then I realized there's instructions coming before. That means before there was the linguistic revelation, there was an experiential revelation. The nature of the experiential revelation is unknown. In my pure view, I find that religion was this genius way of the ancients pointing to how consciousness is in an unknown way witnessing its whole life, because who else is there when you are only present? You see, the concept of you goes away, and the person realizes that energy didn't have a personality, and there are dehumanized states of being. But the value of our humanization is the significance of our conscious performance in this lifetime. That means it's like the world is waiting not to have 8 billion human beings be cloned into a specific behavior, but rather having a sort of principle. To me, an advanced civilization, it's just the principle of advancement. I speak of it in this sense. Why? Because anything can advance. It is the permission of the changing world to get to see something new. Novelty is the gift of a changing world. People come and go. Sometimes I kind of laugh about it. That these talks of mine may outlive me. There will come a time where my voice will live longer than my body. But at the same time, what was the point? And there's this feeling like, imagine 8 billion players about to play the most important game of their life. The advanced civilization is waiting. It is the potential. It is why we are technically living, right? It's like somebody being like, okay, I don't know why I'm alive, but let me go see why my ancestors were alive. And the person realizes the purpose of earlier life was to continue life to be now. It's like our ancestors indirectly lived for us, and our species has stopped indirectly living for the future generations, so we have to directly live for the future generations. There has to be I'm waiting for that day where there's graffiti artists, going in different neighborhoods and all over the planet and writing like that, advanced civilization coming soon, like on walls or whatever. Just this idea, it's the next great legend, dear viewers. We have the archetype of Superman. We have the archetype of mythical creatures, gods, demigods, demi-humans, all of this, interdimensional beings, so many different archetypes. But one real archetype is the advancement of the humanity that we're accepting now. You see, there is a boundary in every human being's psychology where they have to be able to, it's like the brain is not just receiving information, it is compartmentalizing it. Usually when we look at insanity in a civilization, in like a system, let's say in a societal system, that insanity, it's as if the society has a code of conduct, which is how, how can I tell you, it's like back in the day, a person saw a lake and saw a spirit to it. Now we look at a lake, and the spirit of the lake is the laws of the lake, like no littering, what's the name of the lake? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like we haven't lost really a connection to the spiritual realm, but in some sense we have access to a sort of semi-spiritual realm. It's like spirituality right now is how consciousness is personifying itself, really, or personifying anything. Like right now I have an ability, it's like this, just like the Transformers movie, where that car, Bumblebee, was like this, trashed car, and suddenly sees this better car that had sponsored the movie, and suddenly becomes that car. right? Similarly, human beings, once they access a level of intelligence or experience or consciousness, they begin to realize that as a pattern from one moment can be implemented in other moments. And based on the humanity we see, we can perceive that humanity in objective phenomena, right? Like a person can suddenly, like, I don't know, look at a coffee cup and imagine like it grows like two small glass legs and arms and starts like running on the table, like, So I'm saying it's kind of like the person can imbue something that is not human quality, because we're being human. But in the mystical experience, the person realizes that to be a human being and to be a human idea or an ego and a self is an effect of an unknown causal process. So really what it is like the actual spirituality is kind of realizing that the way knowledge was keeping meaning is not the only way. And just like how many different ways our body can move, similarly, there's that many different ways our mind can move, right? And people are just choosing the boundaries of their limitations. Nothing, let me tell you something that I feel exploration belongs to the honest. I think any person who has ever been an explorer on this planet has already had to, as a precondition, had to be honest with reality. Because really what it is, it's like the saying they say that if the person has an idea of themselves that is not themselves, they suffer unnecessarily. And the ancients used honesty, simplicity, decency as ways to energetically keep the moment simple before complexity caused them to react in unconscious cyclical ways. There's a power here, there's a value here. So many people looking for, entities in other dimensions, not realizing we're a question mark ourselves, When I look at the world, I'll be honest, sometimes I do see it like a chess game, and in chess game there's opposing forces and then there's sequences of decisions being made. And what really a strategy is in some sense the outcome of reality. When I think about the human species, I ask myself certain fundamental questions. Okay, first I ask, what does the individual deserve? And what does the collective deserve? It's going into a sort of comparative analysis of how would an advanced human species live life, and how would let's say a not advanced individual human being live life. And once we can, in some sense, find a spectrum of comparison, the mind begins to realize that it's not here to just wait for the future. The world is in this strange game where behind our eyes and before we speak, we are being something that actually the world cannot see. Like these words can never be the extent of all that I am being as a human. Language is a technology. I think that's the safest way to see it. And when you show technology, if like, let's say we right now had a time machine, let's say, I could go to the store and buy a time machine keychain, okay, and I click that time machine keychain. I mean, a time machine keychain would probably take you back like a week, but I'll say, okay, let's say I bought a legit time machine in a hypothetical future of humanity. And if I went back and showed like my ancestors that I was podcasting in being the first among my lineage to kind of speak to a cyber global audience, they would kind of like freak out, right? So technology, to an unacquainted mind with that technology, seems to be magic, right? And I'm saying language is a technology, and think of language being a very advanced technology. Language is a permission for the world to move differently while you're actually being in the first world. Language is the second world. You know, for me, it was one of the most, like, it was literally like a spiritual moment where I'm like, wait a minute, is everybody being a character in a story right now? You know? And they think free will is here to just, dictate the life of the character in the story, but our free will has an ability to, in Taoistic thought, in the Tao Te Ching, it says action through inaction, and that the real Tao is the Tao that cannot be spoken about, or the Tao that could be spoken about is not the real Tao. The truth that can be, the truths in language are not the actual experiential truth. So when a person reaches a point where they're like, wait a minute, so anything my mind does is a self-simulation, but I'm trying to step out of all the simulations and discover the original Earth. And the fascinating thing about the concept of freedom is that because we don't have it, it exists. If we were free right now, the concept wouldn't be there, right? It's kind of like saying, why aren't human beings trying to be human beings? You know, like so many people are trying to get enlightened and all this, but why aren't people trying to just be a human being, right? Because they already are it, and what we are goes into our subconscious second nature, and consciousness usually either moves to the opposite or to a completely new angle, right? Like there can be this argument made that due to the consequentialism of human activity, there's good actions and bad actions, but at the same time, we could be like, before the person made a good action and bad action, there were numerous possibilities of behavior. You know, it's like the more the human being realizes what the brain is doing, the more we're realizing the brain is present in a sort of field of intelligent activity, right? That means I thought about a mathematical interpretation of God, and I was like, okay, the field sums it up. That God is a field and human beings are a particle, and it's this notion that we thought space was lifeless, but imagine space emptiness was a coin, and there was another side to emptiness. That means what is let's say something that doesn't make sense to a square might make sense to a cube. That means the complex mysteries of, let's say, a two-dimensional being are the simple truths of a three-dimensional being, for example. Or what, like, you know. This is just for the sake of example, I'm saying, you know. The dimensions of reality are based on how the attention wants to move. For me, rather than having this view, I'm a soul, you know, inside a mind that's moving a body, or inside a body that's projecting a mind, right? I came to this view that I am an unknown moment of the world, and I pilot myself. That means it's not just important to have vision. If the vision is important, it automatically turns into action. So there is a sort of intent, you know, right? It's like if somebody says Mr.Within, so you're saying that you can close your eyes, notice your inner realms, and see film, like these film snippets, or see films behind your eyes and then talk about them. So what else can be done in the inner realms, or what is the purpose of like an invisible dimension where the world can move differently before we actually act in accordance to it? I would say that really the value of the mind is that it is giving itself an ability to discover. And discovery means that all the information collected is never all information collected. It's kind of like we're in this theatrical performance where these creatures on this rock freaked out. They're like, there's nothing here that makes sense. It's like, what is this world? There's no sense to it, no logic to it. And out of nothing something came, like no logic to it, right? But what we have done is we have stepped into a theater of boundaries of reality that we can control. So really what is going on with the minds of human beings on Earth is that they are using we are using symbolism and sound to simulate an artificial world so that we don't have to freak out because of the meaninglessness of the actual world. But I feel that's really where the strength to be a human being comes, not from what you know, but how fascinated and inspired you are by what you don't know. And we don't know how advanced and great our future can be. Because why is the past just surviving? What's the point of survival? Survival is a sort of future worship. The species evolutionarily has been worshipping its future. Everybody is worshipping their future. We're all living for what we can be. And for me, it's just this issue where I'm like, okay, if there was, imagine a group of people stranded on an island, could we say that if the people on that island were like, yeah, man, forget getting out of this island, we're just gonna, sit down by the trees, meditate, sing songs and live our individual happy lives. But then the person's like, wait a minute, this is not the final destination. This is not the only place where individual happiness can feel like God, it's as if we are 8 billion creatures, 8 billion people stranded on a galactic island, on a cosmic island. Instead of oceanic waters, it's kind of like invisible space, perceivable as pitch black abyss of what we're calling the edge of the world. It's like if somebody says, Mr. Within, do you know anything about the edge of the world? I'll be like, okay, it's it seems to be a pitch black abyss. Can you imagine our species, we develop next level aircraft or spacecraft and we flew to the edge of the cosmos, then we realize it's a mirror. That would be mind blowing, Imagine reading in the news, astrophysicists have realized that the edge of the universe is a mirror. We're inside this spherical mirror, but the mirror is on the inside. I'm just saying hypothetically, guys. I'm being playful here. Because at that point, the only thing we can do is wipe the edge of the universe, wipe the mirror. I don't know, when I think about myself, and people are like, Mr. Within, why do you think about yourself? Because that's how consciousness works. I have this thing that anytime I make a mistake, I'm like, hey man, I'm just a biological organism, just getting by, just trying to make it to, the future where the species is not worshipping its own suffering. Really what it is we are pilots of consciousness. We are a piloting attention. You can close your eyes, move your attention in your inner realms. You can open your eyes, move your attention in your outer realms. Usually the body and the way life is designed is that we're so conditioned into this that we don't have to notice it. It's like the person who's driving the vehicle doesn't need to open the hood of the vehicle, Can you imagine somebody trying to fix the engine of a car while the car is driving in the highway? Really what it is for me, I was I've used this example in other talks of mine where I'm like, okay, let's say a mechanic. Let's say consciousness teleported into the world starting from a person being in a mechanic shop and having a wrench, in their hand, and the person's like, yo, why am I in a world where I am holding a tool, right? And really what free will is doing is free will is holding on to manifestation. The mind is here so that we do not get lost in our bodies. That's the value of the human mind, something that is convincing itself that it can move matter. That means when we think of movement, it's from a force. Free will is like controlling force in space. That's really what the human mind can do, and really what it is it's in the specification, right? It's like, I'll give you an example. Imagine there's a giant that's running, right? We call this giant the cosmos, and on the shoulder of this giant there's humanity, and let's say the shoulder of the giant is called Earth, and we're on the shoulder of this giant, and this giant is running, and we're like, okay, what can we do to help this giant? Let's say somebody decides, all right, I'm alive once, let me be the great ally of the advancement of the living world. It's kind of like a person can love themselves in whatever way, but to love the future of all that we can be is like the greatest freedom. I'm just waiting for the species to love the future. So many people saying they love everybody. How many gurus have kind of like, smiled at people, and we're like, yo, we're all love. Thanks for buying tickets, but we're all oneness and love, yay. We're using oneness as an excuse not to activate the most advanced potential of the human being. And people may be like Mr.Within. All these ancient traditions are saying that there is a singular truth in this world that never needed to suffer or build anything. And I will be like, sure, it's like the moment you realize the world is multidimensional, the cruelty of one dimension does not try to become an absolutist dictator of the philosophical boundaries of reality. It's a multidimensional world, dear viewers. It's as if the sun has many rays of light entering the many eyes of entities, the suns of this cosmos. Because when we think about ancient traditions, they would say Mother Earth and Father Sky. That's what they would say. And when we look at the human psychology, its body is based on Earth, but its mind is looking at the stars and beyond the clouds. Like, that's the fascination of the human being. The Wright brothers were living so ahead of their time, that it's like, to be honest, what the Wright brothers are like holy people to me. For me, they are like divine design. Like, that's what their lifetimes led to. And when I think about the future, how many inventions are there going to be? How many ways of looking at life will the future generations have that will be so much more advanced than our suffering? Human beings are like, yo, life was tough in 2022. There was dishonesty, corruption, cruelty, arrogance. Even the intellectual communities didn't know how to organize. And it's like, man, there was suffering, but the future generations are going to laugh at our tears because our tears never needed to be there. That's the power of the future. The future is the finale of the reward of the effort of the being. It's kind of like, on some level, the person can have a humanized perspective on reality, but so there's times where when my sense of self doesn't have a value to be an idea in my mind, I find myself feeling like, okay, I am this energy. That means before my personality had a preference of how it wanted the world to be, there was a presence here, a presence of a way energy was being to itself, that there was no suffering. That means I remember how can I tell you? It's like the body. Like I had an experience as a kid where I was leaning against this elevator, and you know how sometimes people lean against like a place, they put their right hand behind their head so their head doesn't like touch, you know, the surface of where their head's leaning against. So I was leaning against this elevator like a fool, you know. And my pinky finger got suddenly stuck in the elevator doors that were suddenly opening, you know, and my finger started bleeding and whatnot, right? This was when I was really young in Iran, you know. And I remember after that had happened, it's like there was suffering in the moment, but the suffering became a memory that wasn't paid attention to. And it was as if there came a time where I completely forgot that that had even happened, you know. Something, you know, they don't tell, you know, they don't teach in the educational system is that we're tunneling through the moment, and every moment happens once, you know. It's so remarkable because it's an unknown world we're in. We can reset the story of how our moment means anything anytime. You know, sometimes I think like, why are there so many therapists and psychologists? Like, you know, it's like back in the day at the time of our ancestors, people had such an intense mentality, like they were warriors on battlefields, and now they're people who are like, you know, tears come if there isn't sanitizer, like, you know. So it's as if, like, to me it's about the realization of a dynamic ability rather than constantly thinking the person is a, you know, snapshot photo of a value, you know. So it's like, it's kind of like, why is the self-help industry, let's say in books, like there's so many self-help books, right, that it's kind of like people are like, okay, before I help myself, let me see how somebody else helped us. Oh man, the self-help industry is like, the author's like, I'm definitely self-helping myself, yeah. The world, the phase in history where we're good as, let's say, the way I see sort of global culture emerging online, you know, is that we are not just seeing like good and bad, we're also seeing the silly and the serious. A very important duality, you know, pretty much the life purpose of all comedians. You know, to me, stand-up comedy, it's like, yo, this thing's serious, no, this thing's silly, no, this thing's serious, no, this thing's silly. So pretty much. There's something incredible in life where it's a journey that we have to inevitably trust where it goes, you know. It's like sometimes I'm even curious to know what happens after my life, you know. Because there's moments where I feel like, okay, being isn't going anywhere. Any part of my intelligence that is instantaneously being is like something that is never moved. Really what the afterlife through a mystical perception is how is space going to realize, you know, it was not what's in it. You know, it's like, you know, the afterlife could be the hilarious thing where the world wakes up from being a self, right? But right now we're a self that is waking up in the world. It's such an incredible poetry, you know. You know, for me, if people come up to me in the future and are like, Mr. Within, why do you want to build an advanced civilization? You know, or if I'm like interviewed in the future, somebody asks that, you know, I'll be like, don't you want to see what the most advanced version of the human species after 4.5 billion years where the opportunity is there would look like? You know? So for me, it's just wanting to see how great it can be, that feels like we're doing something great, right? We're all living, like literally it's points of attention. Let me tell you this, imagine somebody in the future, like, let's say somebody in the future wants to be like, here, I'll use, I personally don't like politics, don't like to get into politics, but I'll use the archetype here. Imagine somebody wanted to be president, okay? And that person every day was living for that future archetype himself. It's like, what I'm trying to say is the person is not president, it's just a, let's say, political student in a university, a student of politics at university, and this student wants to be a president, imagine, wants to be the president. So that student in their mind is moving their attention and free will towards an abstract simulation of the future that the mind has crafted in the present. What I'm trying to tell you is that the success that mankind is searching is to be authorize the perfect story. It's as if it's like the person, that student wanted to be president, is already seeing himself as president, but it's in the outer realms, it hasn't happened. It's another way of saying, like, we are living our lives so at the end we can prove to ourselves it had meaning. But this is where the philosophers, like, compassionate saints of a confused world, kind of like come and help out the species. Why? Because there's many ways to look at a moment. Just like we can look at an object from multiple angles, we can look at a subject from multiple angles. A person can think they are inefficient and then be like, okay, I'm inefficient, but technically that would create the archetype of a potential efficient self. What I'm trying to say is that our mind is this non-physical force that is living through our body, which is a physical force, and it's using the body to reach the destination, to reach the actualization of what it has envisioned. Because right now, if I was a solipsist, I'd be like, okay, I imagined advanced civilization, so it has to exist. It already exists, and nobody needs to build it. But there's something about how our mind moves and how much this mind cared for the world it was in. We get one lifetime to care for the world. People don't realize that. This is the best argument for compassion. It's like, why should I be compassionate in this cruel world? And the person's like, yeah, because it's an opportunity. You get a chance, to get to see what the karma of a free being is. Because really what freedom is a reversion and a realization that man can emotionally accept that the unknown is unknown. And that's where endless beauty arises. The moment you realize the world is a known concept and what it is inside an unknown context. When you realize the unknown context, when you realize there's mysteries that nobody knows, there's things that the species can do, which the future generations are seeing are blind spots, but we are not. And the task of the advanced communicator in this modern era is to try to be conscious of the blind spots. Imagine being a young kid and just thinking you gotta take care of your body, but then the idea of religion comes. Then the idea of a soul comes, spirituality comes, right? So the person's like, oh my God, I gotta take care of my body, I gotta take care of my mind, and oh my God, there's a soul here. But what it is that you become Behind your eyes, you are the sun, where thoughts are emanate. We are the life in the moment, and the fourth eye is how our species remembers its collective honor. We don't know like how many mistakes human beings are going to make on this planet, the ratio of mistakes, like efficient actions to inefficient actions, we don't know. And there's this whole dimension of art where we think, well, something has to go in a sequential certain manner, but suddenly like somebody comes up with something nobody imagined, right? Like if you look at history like a film, it's like these creatures that became conscious of themselves, they ushered themselves into the information age, right? And we have created a sort of cyber nervous system where actually any human being has an ability to enter a global platform, right? So it's what's going on this planet is that we are, whether we know it as not as a species, we are acting just like the bees, just like the ants, and we're building something here, right? All our lives, even a person may think they're like, imagine a bad guy, like wondering, like, who was it in the Joker movie? The Joker was telling Batman, I don't know, sorry, not in the Joker movie, but in one of those Batman movies, the Joker was telling Batman, like, people appreciate a hero, but then they will end up hating you because you're different, something in these lines, right? But what I'm trying to say is like, if we don't think that we are our thoughts, because a thought can't think, and we treat life as if we are unknown observers of known variables, when we activate simultaneously, they lead to identity. I just want the species to realize evolution cares for the future. Nature, our biological system, is living for the future. And our minds may think the present is where time doesn't need to be anything at all, but I'll say this, that the future is the privilege of a multidimensionally conscious being. And we are actually living for the meaning of our minds, which is an abstract event. So what I'm trying to say is that we are physical creatures, but we're not living physically, because our minds can see the future, but why do we still live to the future? Why isn't just the vision? Like, I ask myself this, like, when I envisioned an advanced civilization, sometimes I've had visions of kind of like what it would be like, and in those visions, I ask myself, why did I see something that can happen in a better way in a time where things are not happening in a better way, right? And then I realized it's as if the mind is an interdimensional companion of a biological system. You know what it is? It's kind of like, this might be such a bizarre metaphor I'm using, but it's like the body is a pet, and the mind is a leash, and the leash is in the hand of the soul. Or I could just use a better metaphor from the Bhagavad Gita, where they say the idea of the soul is like the person sitting in the chariot, the archetype of the mind is like the chariot driver, and the archetype of the body is like the horses. The body is some sort of just movement of the ability of the particle, right? Of what the force imbued in the particle. There's so many ways of looking at life that if we have human beings behaviorally being cloned, that is like the most unnecessary thing ever. Sometimes I look at religion, and to me the experience of religion is very different than the ideological rather than the behavior, or how do I say it, like, sometimes I feel religions are trying to clone everybody too. be like the same way. But for me, it defeats the purpose. It's like, imagine God was this gardener that planted this garden filled with different types of flowers. And then suddenly a bunch of the flowers, imagine the dandelions, were like, no, all the flowers have to be dandelions to be a natural part of, the truth of God. Right? And to me, it's like, it's like all flowers shouldn't be dandelions. And all human beings shouldn't have the same ideological system of mind. And it's technically impossible because our experiences change us. The eyes of the species is important to wonder about wherever you are, It is where a new vision comes, the era of, the collectively conscious human being, the person. It feels like, okay, I thought I was alone, but I seem to have the same biological skeletal structure as 8 billion other creatures. It's as if by design we have something in common. Now it's to how do we use our commonalities to our advantage, as to the advantage of the whole thing. It's like I'm trying to think, like, how can human beings live where it becomes a win-win situation rather than a win-lose. That means the individual life activity and, let's say, the collective life activity, somehow we find the yin-yang synchronization of it. Right now we're living at a time where it's like we have to make a choice whether we want to live for a collective vision or an individual vision, because one of it, they have different implications. Usually when a person lives for a collective vision, they experience reality as a mind more. When you live for an individual vision, your embodiment is like the melody of your movement. Even the word metaphysics is suggesting like what comes after the physics. It's as if we're this intelligence that our limitations just usher us towards this perfectionist urge for the limitless. Really what the meaning of life is. What does attention do with an unknown world? And all sight has a sort of, singular reception point. It's as if so many different things are happening, but they're all being noticed at the same time as the space where they're happening in. This is the nature of mind. The mind doesn't have a physical texture, but it's a space where movement occurs and it's noticed. And once you have opened all your eyes, you will realize that when the body is at peace, when the body is, let's say, content, and the mind is content, it's kind of like the pancake flip of thinking we were in a simulation and realizing we are being the truth of reality. Being it. Thanks for listening, dear viewers. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.